Daisy, thank you very much. And a warm welcome this morning to the ABTA Travel Matters from Deloitte's. Okay, the consumer. We have to accept, ladies and gentlemen, that the UK consumer is somewhat subdued at the moment, but he and she are not dead. It is not all bad news for the sector, and we shouldn't be slashing our wrists. Not just yet, anyway. Money is tight, but people who are still in a job will want to have their holiday. My presentation this morning, ladies and gentlemen, is based on some research that Deloitte has been doing through two surveys, our Deloitte Consumer Tracker Survey and our Deloitte CFO Survey, all up to the end of March this year. I'm also going to use material and data from GfK Consumer Confidence, British Banking Association, Barclays Jobs Survey, survey research by BDRC, and Google Query Survey. I want to take you all through a journey, hopefully, ending with some messages to the trade, and government for that matter, as well as some positives that we can take from our research. Okay, a little bit about the UK consumer. Well, I've looked at 6 areas where the UK consumer, in my view, is impacted. And as you can see on the slide there. Confidence, well, sadly, we're still in negative territory here. 48% of us are still claiming to pay money into savings rather than spending that money and concentrating on reducing our credit card bills. So that's not a good start, really, for the consumer. Secondly, inflation. Bit better news here. This is now falling, expected to be headline rate by the end of this year below 2%. Shop price inflation now down to 1.3% as at yesterday's announcement. However, food price inflation at 5.4% in March is still a bit of a worry. But overall, that's got to be good for the consumer from an inflation point of view. Job security, 5% fewer consumers from our survey worry about losing their jobs. Unemployment, still at a record level, 8.4%, 2.67 million people unemployed, compared with a European position of 10%. So that is still worrying. Disposable income has reduced with the higher costs of utilities, food, transport, and of course, tax. Not good. Spending expectations, though, and here is where the good bit of news comes, 20% of consumers expect to spend more money on holidays in the next 3 months, but clearly will restrain their spend in terms of some of their household costs. This, I believe, will have a big influence on the lates market. A little bit more about that later. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So confidence and travel go hand in hand. A fairly obvious comment, I think, in many ways, but you can see by the 2 graphs up on the screen there, we've looked at UK staycation spending, and we've looked at outbound tourist spending compared with consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment, notice, is negative, so we're more pessimistic than we are optimistic. But 2 key things I wanted to highlight here on both the graphs, and that is inflation 5-year low and what that did to consumer sentiment. And secondly, the feel-good factor, which, as you will see from the board, is effectively something that occurred back last year at this sort of time, and of course that was the royal wedding. So key message here, we may well see some improving trend as this year passes. With the Olympics and with the Jubilee, I feel that people who have got a job, who feel good, will want to go on holiday. So let's look at household budgets. More secure financially, but less disposable income is the headline. We asked, over the last 3 months, would you say that your level of optimism and confidence in each of the areas is better, the same, or worst? And what we came out from this survey was job opportunities are slightly better than they were. job security is slightly better, and you feel more comfortable as a consumer about your level of debt. But the sad news is your disposable income is down, and we all know the reason for that. But mixed sentiments there. And what we're seeing on the debt side, consumers are looking at that pretty closely in terms of spending some of their disposable income on reducing that debt. Credit card balances are down by 10.8% in 3 years. We have something like 58 billion of debt in this space at the moment. Yeah, 58 billion, compared with Q2 2009 at 65 billion. We're also being smarter with the credit cards we're using in terms of looking for the interest-free ones. And we're seeing actually a lower cash withdrawal at the cash machines, something like £130 a go at the present time, which is 14% lower than 2010. Hiring has slowed. We did see a fair bit in the economy from the private sector taking on employees being made redundant out of the public sector, but alas, that has slowed. But the good news here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the travel sector is doing its bit. 57% of UK travel companies plan to take on new staff in 2012, based on a recent Barclays Bank employment survey. Spending in the household is also predicted to improve, however, not reaching those lofty levels at the end of the 90s and into the noughties. We had something like 4, 5, almost 6% in that kind of period. We had a very, very dodgy period during the middle years of 2006 to 2011. But what we noticed in the fourth quarter of 2011 was, at last, an increase in the spend to 0.5%. And our forecasts are showing that spend will increase in households. And that is in response to, hopefully, what we believe is a much better outlook on inflation. But we're still not going to get to the dizzy heights of the 3%. Clearly here, any big shocks from government policy with consumers will make its mark, because this is a very, very fragile area, as you will appreciate. As I said before, consumers will still not compromise on their holidays. If you're in work, we're going away, whatever it takes. 20% of our consumers in our survey in the quarter ending 2011, same again in the first quarter of 2012. This is also supported by research from BDRC Continental into holiday spending, and it's also supported by a recent Visa study where they found that UK holiday spending is poised to rise by an average £300 this year compared with 2011. So that's an average spend of £3,890 on an overseas holiday. So with that, let's just talk a little bit more about the travel consumer. Where is the travel consumer holidaying at the moment? These are stats, latest stats in compared with last year. Surprise, surprise, long haul, as you can see, is down. Wonder why that is. I think a lot has been said about that this morning. APD, inflation factors in terms of fuel prices, worry of congestion at the airports, all concerns around consumer affordability. So this is an area that government needs to take note of. However, there is an interesting trend when you look at Europe. When I get there. Because what we are seeing is a pretty hefty rise in staycations, up 10%. We're also seeing rises in holidays to Portugal, Italy and Greece, with a fall in Spain. I believe the consumer is looking for the cheap buck here in terms of a holiday, hence why you're seeing rises in those countries. Spain, I think, is down because I think it is inversely related to the staycation piece. Key message here, consumers are driven by a perceived cheaper destination. So we need to watch that as an industry. Interesting research by Google, who took an index from the 1st of January 2008 and mapped in terms of words on the internet, words such as luxury holidays, cheap holidays, last minute. And as you can see, general trend upwards as you see an increase in the use of the internet. But what is more marked here is a doubling in the last minute stat there now compared with a year ago. You can also see there luxury still being seen as important, and particularly peaks in Q1 and Q3, maybe an indication for the industry when they should time their advertising spend. So what's influencing consumer decision making? Well, on the up, social media, advertising, direct links to hotel resort websites and PR. On the downside, word of mouth. I believe social media is beginning to replace that. Search engines, poor old travel agent in the high street, and online advertising. Three key messages here. Online presence through many channels is imperative. Use information collected through demographics of social networks to target consumers. If you have a product of your own, definitely allow access directly on the internet for booking. Timing of your advertising spend, as stated earlier, is a real focus. Look at Q1 and Q3 as a focus. The connected consumer, digital influence dominates. No surprises here, but the stats are quite high. 86% of people booking outbound holidays will in some way have influence from digital. 91% for staycation. Key message here, no rocket science, imperative to have online presence to promote and complete transactions. However, in-store is still important at the booking stage. 29% of our consumers on staycations went to the store for purchasing, and as opposed to 35% on outbound. And our research around that, we believe this is focusing more at the luxury end of the marketplace, and therefore the guys in the high street, the travel agents, there is still a key role here to play. And having that understanding of your customers is absolutely crucial to the future. So addressing today's consumer, what have we learned? Well, I reckon there's 8 key impacts here. Market forces, discretionary spend is definitely weaker. So people, consumers, are going to be careful how they spend their money. They are also going to be concerned about exchange rates. And, you know, simply a weak euro against the pound will help in terms of European travel, but a strong dollar against the pound will certainly damage us from a long-haul point of view. Consumer behaviour, consumers will chase deals, and they will take on late bookings. Business operations, the impact of the press, whether it's a travel company going bust, some political trouble in a country, government announcing new policy, more tax, whatever, that is a very sensitive area to the consumer. So we need to watch that carefully. Available data is absolutely crucial, up to the mark for the industry. It must use it very, very carefully. Rising operational costs with higher fuel prices, more tax and the like is probably the order of the day. And finally, more channels to connect with the consumer is fundamentally important for the future of this industry. So I would like to leave you, ladies and gentlemen, some top operational tips from Deloitte. Make most of the available information you've got on your customers. Make sure it's up to date. Respond very quickly, or as quickly as you can. Make it as easy as possible to book. Seek opportunities at all times to differentiate your product, because if you don't, your competitor will. Constantly demonstrate value for money. Revisit your cost base from a zero-based, bottom-up approach. Cash is king. You have to start recognizing that people will not be paying for their holidays as early in the future as they have in the past. And finally, transparency and consistency between distribution channels is fundamental. Your control over a CRM system and the knowledge of your consumers is absolutely fundamental for your future. Thank you very much indeed.